meeting is being recorded in its entirety. This recording is classified as public record, and the following board members are in attendance: Elissa Richards, Ken Fleck, Becky Hammond, Riley Brinkerhoff, Michael Hansen, Rich Gordon, and Andy Bedingfield. Neil is absent, but maybe he'll be here. Not sure. The following individuals representing the Utah Geological Survey and the Department of Natural Resources are in attendance: Darlene Batatian, Stephen Kirby. Well, Stephen's on his way, right? Ben Dlin and Cheryl Wing, and Andy Bedingfield. You're from Sitla, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Welcome. If present, we welcome all visitors and interested persons at this time. And as a courtesy to everyone participating in this meeting, we ask for all cell phones, pagers, and other electronic devices to be turned off or changed to silent mode. Board motions and votes must be reflected in the minutes and recorded by individual board members. And let us proceed with the agenda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene.
Okay, agenda's up in the screen. We did not print out packets for you, but there are copies of the agenda available for you to follow along. So the first hi Neil.
Thanks for joining us.
The first action item is approval of minutes.
Yes. I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes from the August 20th board meeting. Riley, or a second?
Second.
Okay. And all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Okay, the approval of the minutes from the UGS board meeting from August 20th have been unanimously approved.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that we're recording. So let me check with you guys can move on if you'd like. We are recording. Thank you. If we're recording, we can also run the transcript through a chatbot or AI, and it will do the minutes summary for us. We've done that in the past. It works pretty well. So, but Cheryl, are you keeping notes also? Thank you. Okay, so the next item agenda is approval of proposals. These are proposals that are in progress or have been submitted already. You've previously seen these in emails. I'll scroll through them. I'm not going to read them out. They're also in the board packet. So I will just remind you also that we have a proposal vetting process now where we meet as a team and talk about these proposals. We talk about whether they're strategic for our mission. We talk about the amount that we're dedicating to matching funds, and whether, what the opportunity cost is of allocating those funds to that proposal. We also make sure that we actually have the person power to do it, if you will. Or are we going to be looking at a specific hires for this proposal?
So was there not a go, no-go process in the past?
What's that? No, there was not a go, no-go process in the past. We'll actually talk a little bit about that when we talk about our budget management.
So we need a motion to formally approve these. Okay, I'd like to move forward a motion to formally approve the contract proposal since the last board meeting.
So moved.
And second?
I second.
Okay.
Yeah, we take an email vote from you, and that kind of gives us authorization to proceed. It helps us to have them formally approved.
All those in favor of approving the contract proposal since the last board meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The motion to formally approve the contract proposal since the August 20th board meeting are approved.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's it for action items. Pretty easy today. So next up is my director's report, and I'd like to start by introducing some new staff members. So let's see, a couple of them are here to meet you in person. So Crystal, would you like to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hello, Crystal. I'm Crystal. I'm from Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. And I've only been here for what, 3 months almost?
If that, yeah. So our former finance analyst, Winnie Pan, was stolen by Outdoor Rec. And Crystal came from GOEO, and we just recently met with a few people from the Office of Tourism. She was much loved there. We're really happy to have her here. She's very dynamic and has really helped our finance team a lot. So glad to have you. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then Mark Radlin.
Hello, nice to meet you. Geologist in the groundwater wetlands program that was brought on about 6 months ago. Recently graduated with my PhD from the University of Utah. And I'm kind of bringing in a specialty of utilizing remote sensing, so just satellite data, trying to use that not only within the groundwater wetlands program, but between some of the different programs to balance out some projects. Bring on this new skill set to use satellite imagery and all this geospatial data that we have in excess. So, welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark's already been a great asset to our team. His remote sensing capabilities are really pretty stellar. And, you know, I crossed paths with him before he was hired, working on one of those salt flat stuff with BLM, and I was really impressed with his expertise and his ability to communicate what he does too. So great addition to our team. And then the third new hire is Kitri, who is not here. Maybe she'll pop in later if she gets a chance. She might be getting set up for Maps on the Hill. So she's our new bookstore clerk. She replaced Peter Wilson, and she's been super dynamic since she got here. She already booted up a social media presence for the bookstore. She's been a great addition. So thanks, you guys. Appreciate that. And you're welcome to stay, but you also are free to take off and go back to your day jobs if you like. Okay, next up, we also had some great service awards that we gave out at our recent staff meeting. So Eugene Szymanski and Catherine Laddick have been with us for 5 years. Emily Kleber has actually been with us for 10 years. So, and if you remember, she changed groups from hazards to geologic mapping. And then Ben Erickson, one of our kind of preeminent geologic hazards geologist, who runs our drone program with Christian, does a ton of drone work, and is a landslide mapping expert. He's actually been here for 15 years. So. And then this year, I held off on promotions for a bit while we were, again, trying to get our budget squared away. They do affect on personnel costs. But at the end of the year, we were ready to go forward with a number of employee actions, and some of them were promotions. These are mostly in our groundwater program. So Emily Janerain was promoted from geologist to project geologist. Both Trevor Schlossnagel and Catherine Laddick were promoted to senior geologists. And then Paul Inkebrand and Eugene Szymanski. So Paul is one of our lead groundwater geologists and master tinkerer of all things electrical. And Eugene Szymanski, who's on our energy and minerals, more senior on our energy and minerals team, were both promoted to senior scientists. And that's a pretty big deal at UGS. We don't have very many of those.
So what's the difference between a senior geologist and a senior scientist?
I'm sorry, senior scientists. These, so this is really more like, you know, very well tenured, almost research level senior scientists. They're really kind of almost up at our program manager level in terms of their years of expertise and what they bring to the room. They heavily train and mentor other people as well.
Well, and we view these people, every program, science program has one of these slots, basically. These are reserved for people who really are kind of national level science folks in whatever they're doing. It takes a while to get there. They go out, get money, they complete all their projects, publish, and then they also collaborate at a very high level across their specialty relative to senior geologists.
And I'll talk a little bit more about the vetting process that we have now for these types of promotions as well, because we added a little bit of structure to that. Trying to unplug myself here. New publications, pretty extensive list. There's actually 2 pages of slides, but I think one of the reasons why there's so many publications on this list is we didn't have a formal board meeting like this in October, we had our field trip instead, so it's really been since August that we have been cranking out publications, which is something that our team is really great at. They don't just do science, they get it published. So the Castle Valley hydrogeology study, this was a team effort and sort of Janae's, crowning glory before she resigned or retired last year, excuse me. Cedar Valley Geologic Hazards, that's Tyler Knudsen. 2 issues of survey notes. I brought the most recent issue of survey notes with the map on the cover for you guys. It's a great issue. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. The 2026 calendar of geology. Geoheritage sites and Bouget gravity anomaly map and Tim Rock Glacier map, which was a kind of collaboration between Christian and others. And then Reeves Thrust Fault. This was a really cool study where they used some geophysical methods to try to image the fault zone outside of Bryce Canyon. The Montane Ecoregion Wetlands Assessment, kind of a big collaboration of data and a ton of data analysis and really kind of some new methods for wetlands data analysis, kind of led by Diane Menus and Elizabeth Stimmel. If you haven't spent time with Andrew Repke and talked with him about pozzolin, it's a favorite topic of his and a really cool thing. Pozzolins are concrete additives that are very much low carbon, and they also can create a ton of durability. They're what the Romans used for concrete and why some of their structures are still standing, and it's one of Andrew Repke's favorite topics to talk about. Ben did an interview with KSL, I think, on Andrew's paper, and it created more buzz than you would think pozzolin would create, to be honest. And then delineation of the central Utah faults. A little bit of a different study for hazards. It's off the range front, right? But using LiDAR to more closely map active faults and the difference. In fact, there's a summary of it. Is it in the issue of survey notes?
So,
Yeah, there's a summary and a really great photo of how we were able to map faults with previous LiDAR data and what we can see with updated LiDAR data, and how much more accurately we can image faults through all the vegetation and the terrain and everything. It's really speeding up a lot of our mapping. So I want to take a second and just give a huge shout out to our staff. I've been with UGS about 1.5 years now, and we are a really amazing survey. And it's because of the people that we have here. We attract and retain a really great group of scientists and GIS staff and data management people and our GIO team. They're really committed to the work that they do. They are great in terms of their expertise. We have a much younger cadre of scientists, and they're training up fast, and they're good at what they do, and they're committed to their work, and they're happy to be here, and they have a great, relationship with each other, and we're really going to try to continue to foster that culture. So I just want to take a minute and say thanks to our staff, because they are what makes this survey work and happen. It's kind of my job to take care of them, right? So I wanted to look back about 1 year ago, because it was right about today or maybe yesterday that the federal freeze started to happen. And I remember we had a Monday morning staff program manager meeting where we basically had to bill everything that day and then went to work. And as he was trying to bill our projects, funding portals were shutting down. We really didn't know what was going to happen to our existing project work, let alone future project work. There were days and weeks of great uncertainty. At the same time, as we sort of looked at where we were positioned and the longevity of our TLs and how much funding we actually had still available, we realized that we were about $1 million short for FY25. I knew, I don't know that our staff knew, but I knew that Bill's retirement was coming and imminent. So it was really just a time of great uncertainty. And as the months, went on, that uncertainty really only increased. I come from a more kind of a strategic background, and so really tried to, use strategy to think about how to best prepare us. And I have this little saying that we will do the good and necessary things, and we will do the difficult and necessary things, because it looked like some of what we were going to need to do to manage our budget was going to be difficult. So I was appointed in April. I had already teed up strategic planning for our group, but was pretty immediately handed some budget forecasts from our finance manager, Russ Fillmore, that looked like we were going to end FY25 about $750,000 short and potentially end this year $1.5 million short, which is really not what you want to hear as a new director with not much time to rectify everything. This was in mid-April, and the fiscal year closes out June 30th. And when I went back to our strategic plan and really looked at, well, like, how do I allocate resources, right? If I have to go through our org chart and potentially cut people or RIF, how do I know where to, put the bulk of the resources that we do have? And our current strategic plan really didn't provide much guidance. It had a lot of objectives for programs to do. It didn't really talk about our overall mission. And so I teed up strategic planning, really looking to kind of realign UGS. I think there were a lot of projects that had maybe gotten off topic. There was a lot of money being spent and deployed on things that maybe weren't really, really focused on our mission. And so if we had to trim back and focus and put our funds to our most strategic priorities, what were they? So the questions to address this budget shortfall were pretty clear to me. Why are we running a deficit, right? Like, where's our money going, and how should it be spent? What are the programs spending? How many staff are allocated to programs that are funded versus not funded, and not just funded versus not funded, but mission critical, right? And how much have we allocated to grant match? It turned out that we had really allocated a lot of money to grant match, $1.9 million last year. That means we took our $6 million or so general fund pot and committed almost $2 million of that to match. And was that match really strategic in terms of how we were spending that money? Are we meeting our statutory obligations? What does our statute even say we're supposed to do? Like, we got it out and we looked at it a lot. Are we communicating our work and data to the right stakeholders? And then if changes need to be made, how do we decide what's a priority, right? And it really goes back to that strategic mission. And then lastly, I'm not really somebody that likes to operate in what I call scarcity programming, or where there's just kind of this constant running deficit, right? Where we can't spend money and we can't do what we need to do because we just don't have the funds, right? If you look at our overall funding mix, we actually take in quite a bit of money. So at the right size, which is important, we should be fine, right? So we made some immediate adjustments to address that deficit. And some of these started way back in January when we realized that we were going to have a shortfall, when the feds had locked down all of our funding portals and we were looking at the longevity of our TLs. And Ben ran a chart where he realized that our TLs weren't in some cases even billing to the grants that they had. So we weren't collecting the amount of revenue. I see two people who are consultants nodding their heads about this, because this is how we live and die in the consulting world, right? If you have a project, it's not like they just put the money in the bank. You have to charge to the project. And that means you need to focus on those grants and put it on your timesheets. And it also meant that we apparently had supervisors that were signing timesheets that weren't really looking for that also. So it was one conversation with our program managers and supervisors, and people turned the corner. We asked them to focus on their grants and put those hours on their timesheet. Ben was actually able to go and back bill and recover some money that had already been for projects that were people had been working, but just hadn't put them on their credit, on their timesheets. So we recovered about $300,000. We actually finished the year
right on, if not a little bit ahead of our grant performance, which I'm super proud of our team. They heard the message and they did what needed to be done. We also allowed attrition to do its work. From April, when I came on and we started mapping out our staff and really looking at our organization, we had a couple of TLs, I think 4, maybe 5 TLs that had committed to go to graduate school. And so we were able to, kind of take them out of our org chart and not replace them. And then we had a retirement and 1 resignation. Jay Hill left late last year. And I did execute a small RIF of 2 people, our videographer, and then 1 person that was in the bookstore at a pretty high geologist position. That's not really what we need. We just need a geotag really in the bookstore. And again, without impacting our ability to execute work, right? That's looking at our mission and what should we be doing. And the personnel cost savings were close to $1 million. So $900,000 of permanent cost savings. Although I'm going to allocate about $350,000 of this to filling 3 new science positions. And then I've talked about this a little bit. This is this go, no-go process to vet new proposals. Some of these, in the past 5 years, the feds had a lot of money to put out for proposal opportunities. The Infrastructure Jobs Act, IJLA, Infrastructure.
IIJA. Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
Thank you. And there was one other program.
The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law.
Yes, the BIL, right. And so there was a lot of money, right? But some of that money came at a cost. If money comes through the Fed, some of it we allocated up to 50% match. So again, we had committed, I think in total in 2025, $1.9 million in match. $750,000 of that was for 1 particular grant. It was data preservation. And the main work for that grant was scanning various types of archive records like aerial photos. And had I been here, I might have asked, is committing $750,000 of UGS funds to scanning aerial photos really the best use of our money? Maybe less, right? It's important to build that archival record. We reference it, and those are great resources. The public uses it online, but that's a really big number. So I asked our team to bring new proposal opportunities in for kind of a kickoff meeting. This is again something that we do in consulting, where we have a vetting process and a go-no-go process for new proposals. And these meetings have been really successful. We get a chance to meet one-on-one with our science leads. They pitch the proposal and the work that they're going to do. And again, those questions are, is the work, in line with our mission, right? Is it strategic? Will it help advance, something that we need to know that'll help Utah's understanding of our natural resources? Do we really have the staff to do the work? If there is an external collaborator and there's a pass-through, or maybe they're the PI and the pass-through comes to us, is there appropriate, relationships where we know they're going to deliver the work? What's our overhead? Are we giving up something in overhead in terms of match as well? And do we really have the people? Because right now we want to be really careful about anything that might involve new hiring, right? So we're about the right size for the budget that we have. So we're vetting new proposals as a team. I think it's been really successful. We actually did decline 1 proposal opportunity. I think the rest have all been really well put together. We just recently had kind of our first proposal kickoff where we declined the opportunity. I'd love your thoughts about this. I think these 3 things have really helped us corral our budget to the point where I'm really happy to report this. Instead of a large deficit at the end of FY25, we carried over $1.2 million, I think, from June into July. And instead of anticipating $1.5 million deficit at the end of this year in June 30th, we actually anticipate ending FY '26 with $1 million plus carryover into FY '27. And looking ahead into the end of FY '27, because remember, we're going to the legislature right now to talk about our FY '27 funds, right? Are we gonna be okay if we're not asking the legislature for additional funds? And it looks like we will continue with this carryover into FY '27. So I thought that we were going to have to ask the legislature for supplemental funds to make up the difference here. I thought we may need to ask the legislature for additional funds for FY '27. I don't think we do. And potentially, we may not need to ask the legislature for additional funds in FY '28. Although if we want to get creative about building block proposals, maybe there's a unique project that we want to propose.
Is there anything that's unexpected that we're giving up to do that?
That we're giving up to do any of this?
Right. The carryover, and obviously, you mentioned our data preservation. Anything else? Like, are we getting the mapping done that we want?
Yes, I think really we were a little too big and a little too free with some of the data match funds, and we were kind of hemorrhaging money because we weren't recovering our grant. We weren't capturing that grant revenue. It was really those three things. We have to capture grant revenue. If we have a $600,000 grant, we have to charge for it, and we have to stay on track and recover those funds. The feds are not giving out no cost extensions now. So we need to finish that work. We need to finish it on time. Did you want to ask?
Yeah, to add to that, I think part of the scarcity mindset that Darlene referenced earlier was we were chasing whatever money was on the table instead of chasing smart money. And I think really a big part of the last year has been intentionality and going after money that makes sense. We're still completing the same projects. We're still getting deliverables on time, but now we're chasing grants where the econometrics just make a bit more sense for us. We're not committing quite as much state match. We're not having to spend as much of our own money to get the work done.
Yeah, it's that, and then really efficiency. I mean, that's the summary of all this stuff is getting efficient at what we do, how we bill it. And we're producing what we have in the past. So there's been no change in that.
They're not real slow down.
No.
No. In fact, we might be producing more because we've asked people to really focus on the work that they have in hand. I think it's natural for scientists, especially I think our scientists, to come into the survey and, they have this opportunity to do what they love to do and maybe not focus on work that they've committed to do. And so just reminding them that, hey, if we've taken out a grant opportunity, we actually need to perform on that. And so I think Ben used the word intentionality. It's a little bit of discipline also. And really, we didn't really need to come down on people like this. It was a reminder, to, hey, this is how we take in revenue if you've committed to this. So I think we've right-sized our staff. And I think we're just more intentional about how we work.
Did you implement strategies to make or policies to make sure that people are billing their grants? Like that's something that is, because clearly that's been a big factor.
Yeah, and who knows how long that had been going on, right? Possibly years.
Oh, I think that was
Systemic?
Yes. And throughout my time here, that was just kind of the nature. And our budget really was constructed to account for that, if that makes sense, to leave that space always there for inefficiency and a lot of building.
Timesheet discipline, it's not only important for recovering those funds, but if every day you have to fill out your timesheet and you go, oh, I was here 8 hours, but I actually, what did I do? And can I bill a project? I think I can only bill 2 hours today. What did I do the rest of the time? It's really helps
that
focus.
Self-reflection.
Yes.
It's good for budgeting future proposals. You know what you're really truly
Thank you.
using. So that's great. And those $1 million carryovers, they're not swept in, those are secured, correct?
Correct. We also raised, so we have a ceiling for how much money we can take forward with us into the following year. It's called the lapsing ceiling. And we did lapse funds last year. We overshot our revenue goal, our revenue expectations so much that we actually lapsed money, which really beats at me. I think we lapsed $270,000. We have since raised our lapsing ceiling. So it's quite generous now.
Yeah, happy to speak to this. Previously, we've been able to carry over 1.2 million into the future fiscal year. And secured money, the legislature can't crawl it back. This past year, Russ Fillmore and Roger, who's the head of DNR Finance, they increased our carryover authority up to, I think, 1.5 million. So that's an additional 300,000 we can take over into future years. And we treat it a little bit as a savings account, even though it refreshes every year. We really rely on that in our budget. We plan to use pretty much all of it every year.
It is really nice to be able to anticipate that we have carryover funds. I still can't quite see into the dim dark future at the end of FY28, but it's important to me that we have a secure and stable financial future for UGS. So that's why I'm kind of keeping my eye on FY28 as well. And the other issue with our accounting, and Ben might go into a little more detail with this, is we have a restricted account, right? It's where our min release and our severance funds go. And the legislature, our statute allows us to collect a certain percentage of min release and a certain percentage of severance. That goes into our restricted account. It's called our Fund 1137. And then the legislature appropriates a certain amount out of that fund for us every year. Our appropriation this year was $3.247 million. It's actually going to drop $750,000. There was a little bit of an accounting error last year. So the one and only building block that I do have right now is to get that $750,000 appropriation back in our restricted account. However, the collections into that account, so our appropriation is 3.247, but the collections vary with economics and with, mining and severance taxation. And so for the next 3 years, we don't actually anticipate to be able to collect anywhere near 3.247. Mike Vandenberg is the expert on this, and it might be great to have him show you guys sometime how he does his magic 8-ball to try to help us predict what we might collect. Because if we budget to 3.247, but we don't expect to collect more than 2.3 million, we already have $1 million offset in our budget, right? So we have to be really careful about that, and we rely on Mike quite a bit to help us with that.
And is that just price? I mean, you actually have more volume coming through from a lot of.
At a
So
lower
it's
price.
just the price that's cutting that.
It's price and volume. I mean, it's a combination
Right.
between severance and mineral lease. And it is, I'm not going to go into it more than that. That's a good Vandenberg topic.
It's a great.
It's a complicated thing to try to figure out what we're going to
And
get.
one of them is on a rolling 3-year average, just to make it.
Hmm. Any other questions about this? Because now that I am comfortable with our budget, and this was honestly like kept me up at night for the last 9 months. So when Russ, I don't know if we covered this, Russ went to, not only did Outdoor Rec steal our financial analyst, but that's okay because we have Crystal. State Water Resources just stole our finance manager. So Russ Fillmore went to Water Resources, and we're in the process of recruiting a new finance manager. Stefan's leading up that recruitment, and that notice will come out in the next
Hopefully today or
couple
tomorrow.
days.
Yeah.
So we're gonna leave it open for a while, really try to find a really highly qualified finance manager to help us, especially because our budget does have some uncertainty. Not only do we have uncertainty with min release, but we still have ongoing uncertainty with federal funding. Proposals have been delayed. Proposals that normally would have been successful have not been awarded because there isn't sufficient funding, which is a little bit different wording than we've seen in the past. Some of the programs that we work on are up for reauthorization in the future. So we still have some uncertainty. Again, Ben's going to talk a little bit about that uncertainty when he talks about our budget and how we've sort of calculated where we hope to land with, depending on different funding scenarios.
Has the state map proposal come out yet?
We're still waiting for the notice of funding on that one. And we had a meeting last week with the national leads, and where it stands, the funding has been approved. at its current level, which is great, right? So we could conceivably expect about the same amount. It's still waiting on a language approval with the new director of the USGS. And we have been in close communication with them with respect to whether we need to try to do some poking from our end to get it to come out, right? Because it's kind of sitting there, and we've been told no at this stage. So
It's coming,
it's coming,
but it's
but
delayed.
it's delayed, right? And so there's almost no way, and because the most recent state map proposal was delayed too, we've got some delays, and that adds up to less funding per annum, basically, because stuff gets pushed to a future time.
I mean, the state legislature's been asking different state agencies to cut 5 to 15%. Does that not come down to you guys, DNR?
It's actually accounted for in our budget.
Okay.
So, yeah, I actually, went to Nathan and Joel. So I report to a deputy director at DNR, who reports to Joel Ferry, the executive director at DNR, and pled my case that we had just gone through about all the personnel management that we could do. And if I had known that I was gonna have to absorb a 5% cut, I would have waited to do all of that. And here's my people that I'm giving out, right? That amount, that adds up to about, it's 5% of our general funds. And so it adds up to about $320,000, 3 positions maybe. I did plead our case to Joel that we just went through a contraction, and I don't think I can support much more. The truth is, I'm gonna say this even though this meeting's being recorded. The truth is I still have 3 open vacancies accounted for in our budget, and we've accounted for the 5% in our anticipated. I think we're okay.
That's the key of having a healthy carry forward at all times, because these things are always going to come. We have that sitting there, it buys us time to adapt. We don't want to send people out the door.
Yeah.
I think we're there, you guys, for the first time in I don't know how long for the survey, but I think we have done what we needed to do. We have secured financial stability for the survey. And because we have a positive budget, I was like, okay, let's take care of our staff. I had asked people to hold off on promotions, adjusted salary increases, and even incentive awards. So starting in late November, early December, we started talking about those. And I asked our program managers to send me a list of people that they thought would be appropriate or, ready for these. And then I wanted to do something a little bit different with how promotions are handled at UGS, because, watching Phil deal with these, we sort of get like ambushed, every month and a half with somebody who wants to promote somebody, right? Or give somebody an ASI, which adjusts our personnel costs, right? When we give somebody a salary increase. And
Would you define ASI?
It's adjusted salary, something, I don't know what the A stands for, salary increase.
I think it is adjusted.
It's like a wage.
And then same with incentive awards. I want to give this person $500. I want to give this person $1,500. Can I give this person $250? And it was just like, honestly, like being ambushed all the time with, I have to go into Russ's office. Like, what does this do? Can we afford this? And so now that we have a secure budget and know how much room we have in our budget, I asked our program managers to sit down as a team and talk about what are the benchmarks for promotion. I think you just asked that question earlier. How do we decide when somebody's ready to be promoted from geologist to project geologist, from project geologist to senior geologist, and then senior geologist to senior scientist? Are the benchmarks the same between programs? Have we ever talked about that, right? And there was a little bit of reluctance from the program managers at first to have this conversation in public with the other program managers. They're like, I've just always had to, this was a one-on-one with Bill kind of conversation. But to try to ensure that there's some parity between the groups and also start talking about people with each other, because we do have some silos between our programs, but we have people that also work across programs. Mark's going to be working across programs is a great example, right? And so I was like, just try it once with me. right? And so we had some really productive discussions, I think, about when we're ready to promote people, who they are, sort of, how many, have they done a number of publications? How's their external engagement? Are they working across programs, right? Are they really delivering at that level that we expect? And we vetted people as a group. Want to add anything about that process?
Well, beyond the fact that it's very refreshing to go through it, because that's one of the siloing thing within the survey. Yes, we do all work for the same organization, but the siloing is real long-term. And this is an exercise that starts to break that down. So we're more consistent, and it's across all of our job titles too. It's not just because we have the geologist track, but we have all these other tracks too.
We have all
The
these other
GIS tracks,
GIS.
the folks who make our amazing websites and apps. So it's trying to talk about those and find different ways that those can be more or less systematic across all the different positions.
So you're determining criteria in each of those different types of positions, like benchmarks
Mhm.
or ASIs.
Yeah.
Or incentive.
Hugh put together a really great worksheet about that with his team, and they did a lot of kind of groundwork. And Becca Downard, our wetlands manager, went and got all the other types of, Stefan mentioned all the other types of job classifications, because we have biologists that don't really fit into the geologist track. They can't get a PG license, right? Our GIS analysts, our data management folks, our educators and GIO, right? And so, and especially at this younger demographic, people are looking for upward mobility. I still feel like maybe we need a different category between project geologists and senior geologists, right? Because people will hang there in that project geologist phase for like 6 years. That's a long time to not see your title change. We can give people salary increases, but people are delivering a lot. They're writing papers, they're starting to put proposals together. And so it's not off the table that we could potentially create another position level in there as well. At the same time, we talked about salary increases, and I gave our program managers a budget for incentive awards. Finally, for people who had really been showing up in extraordinary ways beyond that extraordinary that they do every day. And then because this project process seemed pretty successful, it's like, how about if we do this twice a year? So we'll continue to do this. We'll do this again in June. So for people that are teed up for promotion, they have a little bit more certainty that, there's a timeline for that. And then we'll do it again next December. And this incentive award pool, they can deploy that money at any time during the next 6 months.
What's the staff turnover like overall? And is there any evidence of people being poached by industry or other
It's
places?
the other way
because of
around.
salary?
Yeah, it's kind of the other.
Yeah.
Our attrition's really low. I mean, I think generally it's like 5% or less a year. Sometimes, we have periods where people leave, but it's very low. People come here for a career, and we do get people from industry, very high level people from industry. When we float these permanent science positions in any of our science groups, it's amazing the applicant pools we get.
So
Yeah.
no, but that doesn't mean that there isn't grumbling. In fact, after we ran through this first batch of promotions, 2 people came to my office and they were like, wow, I thought I would be in this pool of promotions. So, and these are people that their managers had talked about promoting and felt like they weren't quite ready. So those people are teed up for promotion in June. And I want to make sure that when we do our performance reviews, that we're talking to our staff about this. If they're not quite ready for promotion, where can they take that extra step? Can we give them some additional training so that they're more ready? Can we have them maybe work with a different colleague and pick up some different skills, right? So I care about this a lot. I've been there in my career as somebody who's been, passed over for promotion or you name it, right? It can take a while. So this is important to me. And I am really grateful that we have the budget to be able to do this, and that overall we have really great managers and supervisors who look out for their people and are bringing those to our attention so we can take care of them. So I think the total change to our budget for all of this was about $85,000, which we can absorb, right? And we can absorb it again in June. And again, because we have a positive budget, we can do this. This is really important to me that we take care of our staff. We can also we can also fill these 3 science vacancies, kind of padded our budget a little bit. And so we have a position in energy and minerals for a mid-level scientist. Was going to be to help Christian with the geothermal building block, and may actually be someone that we bring in to help Steph Mills. She has stacked her plate pretty deep, and I think we need to get her some help. It's possible we may even want to put another person into energy and minerals. We also have a couple of TLs and one Schedule B person that will be rolling off of some data pres work, and that could maybe be moved around and deployed to help with some of the field work for energy and minerals.
That's just for the critical minerals grants.
Yeah, it's critical minerals and something else that we'll talk about at the end of the meeting. I think you guys were circulated something about this. It's still up there today. So, a strat mapper or mapper for the geologic mapping team. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, this is a bit, so we're looking at, we have our lead mapper, Don Clark, who's going to retire in the not terribly distant future. This is an opportunity to bring somebody in before he retires. This person, we're kind of leaning more towards a traditional mapping role that would likely be focused out in the West Desert. And if we can bring them in the near term, we can have the opportunity for overlap with Don. While he's still here, trying to learn the game.
West Desert, not ESC,
I think that's going to be a really popular recruitment when we open that up, because who would want to come do mapping for the Utah Geological Survey? It's like the dream job if you're a geologist.
Oh, yeah.
I might apply. It'd be more fun than what I'm doing. You send me on the field, please.
Yeah.
And then remember, Stefan is wearing 2 hats, right? He is our deputy director, but he also, there's a program manager position in mapping that hasn't really been filled. And groundwater definitely needs help. Potentially 1 or even 2 people in our groundwater group. They are maxed out. So great to be able to confidently move forward with those hirings. I'm not stressed about that. We can do it. And I think we can keep those people busy and funded, right? We can do some things around our office to kind of improve our culture and our environment. We had hats made right before Christmas and gave them out to our staff. Holiday party, I brought them in for you guys as well.
Modeled by Riley.
Yeah.
Riley's already representing. It looks good on you too. It's a good looking hat. We had them made in like 5 different colorways, and I think the staff snagged all the really colorful ones. I'm doing just some limited office upgrades. We have these bottles of water that go in like 5 different places in our office, and they're kind of a tripping hazard. And the people that are supposed to change out, it's like Mount Olympus water, but something else. The people that are supposed to change out the water bottles are never on time. So we have like too many empty bottles and none full ones, and they're weeks late. And so the heck with it. We're swapping out our water fountain with a filtered water bottle station like you have at the airport. So you just fill it up. It's not that expensive. It's like $3,000. We are going to put the Diabloceratops skull that's here in the core center in a really nice display case and move it into the DNR lobby. It's a big empty lobby. Our bookstore is right there. So I asked admin if we could make a display case for it and move it into the lobby. Again, it's a couple grand, but something that'll just kind of really let people know when they walk in the building that the Geological Survey is here, and this is what we do. We went through, I don't know if I harped on our staff about housekeeping and all of the paper that we have spread all over our offices and conference proceedings from the 80s and bookshelves that just have paper that nobody ever really looks at, and really asked people to spend time clearing out all that stuff. And then we had a surplus event and it got rid of a ton of cabinetry and bookshelves. And so we have some space now. And some of our people are really shoehorned into really tiny little cubicles. We have more people. And so I'm going to do some space planning and see if we can spread people out, either get people into their groups or maybe mix them up a little bit, right? the hazards bullpen. You're welcome to come walk around our office sometime. If you ever have a little time, just, let me know and I'll take you on a tour through our building. I also may just see if we can use our space a little bit better, spend a little bit of money on some cubicles. We could use another conference room in our area. Our conference room gets double booked a lot. There's not much privacy space for people who need to, have a business conversation or personal phone calls. So maybe just a couple little rooms where people can sequester. So just a little bit of space planning. We have to be careful. DFCM adds like a 350% surcharge on everything from what I can tell, and we can't do stuff ourselves. So DFCM is super expensive, but we'll just get some numbers and plan accordingly. I'd also like to get a different PA and AV system in here, so we can hook up a little more clearly. We have more and more workshops in here. There's a core workshop that Mike Benenberg and Ammon are putting on next week, and Riley. So maybe we can get a little bit better sound in here because it's hard to hear when you're in the back of the room.
We can shout next week.
Vandenberg gets really soft.
He is a quiet guy.
I know. What happens? He's like,
He doesn't have 5 kids.
doesn't have any kids. Yeah, he's super soft spoken. I can't hear him in the back. It could be that I'm getting old and maybe it's cheaper for me just to buy some hearing aids, but and then we need some equipment. I know we need a bookstore copier. We had a match grant on a new large format scanner. So it's great to be able to say yes carefully, with some thought to some of these purchases. And like we just mentioned, we can weather some economic headwinds, right? A 5% general fund cut, we're going to be okay. The Fed's back off of a grant or two, we're going to be okay. Riley?
So this has come up in years past, but the bookstore is very much more of a DNR book than a UGS. Do we get value off of that, or would that be better to put onto DNR and not have that on the UGS budget?
Well, in the past, the bookstore has run at about an $80,000 to $90,000 deficit, right? So there was a strong case to be made for that. But with the personnel change that we made, with our new bookstore manager, Michelle Ricketts, who's super enthusiastic and has really dressed the bookstore up, and she's also great at external engagement. We have closed that deficit down to maybe
About 20,000.
Yeah. So we're making a lot of progress, and I think it will actually get better. So I'm not sure that DNR admin would run it the way we run it. And to be honest, it's such a benefit to the community that I'm willing to absorb the rest of the deficit for that.
Well, and this is as close to balance as I think it's ever been.
I mean,
My
it's been over
understanding.
100,000 in some years.
Yeah, so we've made amazing strides on that front.
Again, just a little bit of strategy, right? Why is it running at a deficit? Well, we had, a very expensive person, sitting behind the counter.
Yeah.
That wasn't really necessary. So that was a hard one for me, but I think it was the right decision. And Katrie's a great addition to our bookstore team. Michelle is killing it back there. She's really, really refreshed the look. I encourage you guys to go take a look at our bookstore. You also get a discount if you want to shop there. It's a great place to pick up books, guidebooks, calendars. Yeah, so about the calendars. So we had a bunch of calendars left over last year, couple 500 maybe. So I asked that maybe we print $1,000 less, and we also increased the price $1, and we ran out. And I heard about it. Like, we ran out before Christmas, and Amy Joy, I know, you guys can totally blame me for this. And then Amy Joy Donahue did a news article about the calendars, and that's when we sold out. I think it within 2 or 3 days.
I think we sold 300 calendars within 2 days per article,
Oh.
and they were gone.
And then we were like, so one of the things that UGS does is each employee gets 6 calendars to give out to friends or whatever. Like, some of us that hadn't given out our calendars were like giving them back. So we'll order more next year and maybe raise the price again, right? I mean, we raised it to $9
$8.95.
Yeah, that's like too good of a deal.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you wanna run out.
we,
Cause then it makes
yeah.
it, it just makes it that much more like desirable.
Oh, we ran out by like 300.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
You want to run out on January 15th.
Yes, we want to run out on
That's right.
January 15th. So we need somebody with some business analytical skills to run the counts on optimizing the calendar count and price, and I think that can probably handle that for us. So yeah, the bookstore it's not quite in the black, but I think that it is just one of those things that is a huge community engagement. It's been named like best bookstore in Salt Lake before. It's a great little shop, and I would prefer that UGS continue to run it. In fact, DNR admin has been a little poo-pooey about our bookstore, and now that we're like close to running in the black, I'm not hating. Yeah, so, and then we have breathing room, right? We can just, the hard work is done with our budget. We'll continue our strategic planning process. We need to develop a new strategic plan. I'm actually engaging the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, GOPB's strategic advisors team, to help us with the next step, because the fun part is over. We had a program manager workshop, we had a staff workshop, we collected a lot of information from all of that. The hard work comes next, which is what really are our big goals. What are our objectives? What work should we be doing? How do we help the state of Utah? What work should we be doing? I think the next slide actually goes through this. But, I want to focus on this culture piece, right? Our employee connections. Let's try to break down some of those silos. We did speed networking at our staff meeting last week, 2 weeks ago. Where people sat down from each other and like had a 5-minute conversation with some prompts on slides, and then you move and talk to the next person. We did it in the DNR auditorium. I think there were 65 or 70 people there, and with half of them talking all at the same time, it was really noisy. And people had great feedback about it. They're like, yeah, I have always known this guy, but never talked to them, right? People asked if we could do it again. So we'll do it again, maybe in a year, and help people get to know each other. Our Geo committee is starting to host or, sort of lead out on a couple different things. They were doing this Bike to Culture coffee thing. People are talking about maybe having a picnic with kids or dogs. And then we have our staff picnic every year. And then really training up our next line of future leaders. Again, we're putting people into higher level roles. We're putting people into supervisory level roles, maybe without the runway of training and mentoring that we would like. We really need that next line of leaders. And so if people are going to move into supervisory roles, we want to make sure that they have those soft skills to really take care of people that we're putting in their charge, and know how to have those really healthy conversations, including the difficult conversations, right? We bring TLs on, and they're supposed to have this term limited employee. We usually bring them on for specific grant, and then they're supposed to, go along to their next career opportunity, and that's a difficult conversation for people to have sometimes. So helping people feel safe in those kinds of conversations is important. So again, strategic planning, what I called return to mission, build alignment with our mission. What does our statute say we do? Align our work to that, align our staffing to that. What does that cost? Create permanent secure funding and shift where we need to shift, right? That's what we started out to do at the outset. And I think we did it even without completing our strategic plan, right? So I think just taking a step back and saying, we can do this. Let's envision a future for the survey where we're not in this kind of deficit spending mode, right? Let's align our work with that, and let's talk to our staff about that. Let's think about what we focus on and what are our overarching strategic imperatives. How do we help Utah make decisions, right? We provide really important science that helps Utah's decision makers make really important decisions. We're a resource stressed state.
and the data that the Geological Survey provides really helps support those decisions. We have secured, I think, we're going to check back in a year, right? I think we've secured stable financial support for the survey, and we are deploying those funds responsibly. In the end, this was not the legislature's problem to fix. This was our problem to fix, and we did it. And I'm super proud of our team. So.
Well, great job on navigating all those challenges. So
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Seems like teed up for success.
Yeah, it seemed clear. The issues seemed pretty clear to me. So it was just trying to bring people along. I think the hardest part was that small rift created a lot of insecurity and uncertainty in our staff, and I'm sorry for that, but it also needed to be done. And then the rest of it was just kind of implementing some, intentionality and a little bit of discipline, right? Actually, wasn't that hard once you knew where to push. Stressful.
And keep sharing those positive messages with your team, just with the team, just so that they feel more secure and, the future's better defined. Because I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of repetition.
Yeah, a lot.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great job.
So, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And I have to say a 2% staff reduction,
I know.
coming from the mining industry where prices go down and you lose 30% of your staff, 40% of your staff.
We just let attrition do the rest of
Yeah.
it, right? So, and it's hard to say to tell some of our program managers, no, we're not going to fill that position. You need to just be more efficient, right?
Yeah.
I know, but we have a really young team, and some of them haven't seen that before. And it was also on top of, all the DOGE federal actions, right? So there was just a lot of uncertainty in general out there, as we were all watching our coworkers potentially lose their jobs or try to make decisions about whether they should take a fork in the road or something, right? It was all happening at the same time. So I know that this is when I can relax now, having kind of gotten
At the start of legislative session?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know.
Well, thanks, because that's actually the next slide, right? So we really don't have a do or die building block. If we had to ask the legislature in this year of all years for $750,000 or $1 million in extra funding, I doubt we would get it. So we do have this adjustment to our restricted account. I think that one will go through. Not really a do or die thing. We don't have any other building blocks this year. I originally had that supplemental to make us whole for FY26. And I originally had another $750,000 building block for FY27. Those did not go through. We don't need them. Jill also didn't, the governor's office didn't even put them in. We have some cleanup bill intent language. I'll show you that in a second. We've had a couple proposals that we've been asked for. One was for a deep brine well. This was something through Senator Sandals' office. So we just submitted that proposal yesterday. You want to talk for a sec about what that is?
Yeah, this came to us, so there's interest in other sources of groundwater for dust suppression out there around the lake. You guys have probably heard that tale. There's also interest in lithium resources or other brine resources, whatever they may be. The other thing that's prospective out there is geothermal. So we went big on this because if somebody wants to fund it, great. It could be an opportunity to look at fluids for groundwater, mineral brines, and then also some geothermal stuff out of a good test hole somewhere near the Salt Lake. So we'll see where it goes. It's a rare chance to look at what I would call deep crustal fluids. That's kind of a.
Would you put it on with a horse or one of the big growls?
We'd have to talk about where it goes. I think we don't know
Siting
yet,
is
but
general.
because there's this nexus of overlapping resources, which is groundwater, there's potential mineral brines, and then geothermal, and we probably want to cite something in that sphere. And then the point of this is that we would engage stakeholders throughout the process and get this data out there. That this is what the fluids look like at 8,000 feet in this area. This is the potential resources or not. We don't really know. This is the geothermal resource out there. So the area adjoining the Great Salt Lake is very prospective for geothermal too.
And again, a senator came to UGS with this question, right? What do we know and what would it take to find out, right? So we're like, well, we have to drill a deep well. It's like, how much would that cost? I was like, we'll send you a proposal. So we just sent that out yesterday.
So is that an appropriations or is that more of a bill that senators?
It's not even a bill. We just sent a proposal and we'll let him do what he thinks he should do. If he wants to bring a bill forward, that'd be great, right? So.
Yeah, we tried to focus on the science questions because I think that's where we can contribute to this. And there are real science questions. Below a few thousand feet, we don't know much about the fluid system. We really don't, and the geothermal system in a lot of places.
Probably confined at some level. I have no idea, right? So, but Stefan wrote a paper about deep wells across the Great Basin 10, almost 15 years ago. So we can rely a little bit on the data collection that he had. We have a little bit of a head start, but it would take, a really in-depth conversation about siting and more in-depth about what are our objectives.
To get the flows that you would need to have a minimal impact on the Great Salt Lake without robbing Peter to pay Paul also.
I'll be quite honest,
how
I think
would
it's
you find-
always a robbing Peter to pay Paul thing after doing water budgets for a long time. There's no like extra water, right?
There's no
There just
extra
isn't.
It's probably also not really clean water that we probably want to be discharging.
It's probably not, but again, it depends on where we look. And the truth is, I think there's interesting science questions beyond just Great Salt Lake stuff about fluid chemistry and the greater crust and the resources that are connected with it. And it's something that really hasn't been looked at systematically.
As long as you're not over promising that you're gonna magically.
So,
I mean, that's
Volumetrically.
that's above and beyond that. We would basically see what the fluid characteristics are at different levels, and then in terms of chemistry, and then probably do some really nice temperature gradient measurements for geothermal stuff.
the question that Senator Sandel asked us is, are there deep mineral brines at depth? If we were to bring that water up, could we harvest minerals out of it and then discharge that water either to the lake or use it for dust suppression? Those are the questions that he asked. This is how we can answer them.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, there's a lot of
I'll leave
there's
it
a
at
lot of
that.
complexities here. And the way I phrase this really is, this is a leader. This is to start a discussion about these science topics that we really don't know about, that are out there. And they're not just by the Great Salt Lake, they're all over, so.
and I just appreciate that, Senator Sandel looked to UGS to answer this question. So if we can, it was a $10 million proposal, so I don't know that it'll.
Yeah,
go
the well
anywhere
itself would
right
be
now.
very, very expensive. And we would just, again, we'll see.
Do you feel like the focus on the Great Salt Lake and the awareness of that in the legislature has raised your profile because you're doing so
Yes.
much on the water balance there?
I think it has.
Sure, it spurred a ton of work. If you go back about, 6 or 7 years before there was a lot of legislative focus on the Great Salt Lake, we did work on the Great Salt Lake. We have for years. Andrew does brine monitoring and then, work with the saline mineral industry. But since then, there's been like this explosion of science around the lake. And a lot of that has been spurred by the legislative interest that drives research.
And it turns out that we don't actually know that much about groundwater inflow into the Great Salt Lake. So a couple of the proposals that you all approved, some of them were to do some additional geophysical mapping, and there's existing geophysics that look like there are potentially dewatering structures aligned along faults into the Great Salt Lake. We don't know much about those, right? So there's a lot yet to learn. If we can get a better handle on groundwater inflow into the Great Salt Lake, and that means we can help manage that groundwater resource upstream, right? Upgrade it, along with surface water. So there's a lot to be learned there. And our sister agencies are helping fund some of that work. We've got tech team grants and, work through FFSL to install additional nested monitoring wells. We're learning more about that. One of those was artesian. That was kind of interesting. So we're continuing to, again, use those funds to try to understand the science better to help people make management decisions about the Great Salt Lake. Even the Phragmites article in here that talks about invasive Phragmites and the evapotranspiration rate of frag, you could put all the water in the world into these streams, and if it has to run through Phragmites,
not much of it's gonna make it through the lake. The evapotranspiration rate and the water consumption of invasive Phragmites is fundamentally counterproductive to trying to get anything into the lake. We have got to manage frag, and we can put tens of millions of dollars into frag management and actually probably see a good return on that investment in terms of water into the Great Salt Lake.
I have a real quick question. How deep is deep? Is there a consensus?
That's a great question. We'd have to, I mean, we're gonna be limited by cost, right?
Yeah.
What we could ultimately do. It would be pretty amazing to get something greater than 4,000 feet. Maybe, I don't know what that could
There's
be.
not a massive price difference between 4,000, because you're already doing casing on that. So 4 to 9, it's not gonna be huge. It's gonna be several hundred thousand, not millions in that.
Economy of
Yeah.
scale.
They're already bringing out a big rig.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big rig thing. No way around it. So yeah, that would be part of the discussion we need to have if this.
But we got some big rigs available. They're getting dropped right and left. So
Well, that's what I mentioned.
Now's the time.
Depending on the drilling market, you know, this cost could vary quite a bit.
Is your presentation gonna be open to the public, or is that a closed door?
Our legislative presentation, no,
The
it's,
one on January 30th.
it's online or you're welcome to come in person. So I'm not quite sure what room it will be in. I don't know if we have that information yet. And I wouldn't be surprised if this date and time changes. I hope they don't move it up because I'm not ready for this presentation yet.
Will you send us an email of the room location when you find it?
I'd like to say Senate Room 210.
And then how to get online if we're not able to attend.
Yeah, but we can send those.
Cheryl
That'd be
and
great.
Ben, can you guys take care of sending that out? That'd be great. Thank you. Appreciate that. We would love to have your support. Again, I'll be doing a presentation, but we don't have a big ask in front of the legislature. So my job, especially as a new director, is really, to engage with people, right? Get to know people, understand our value proposition as a survey and communicate that to people, build support so that someday when we do have a ask for the legislature, we can do that. And also so that they see UGS as a resource, right? Because this opportunity even to have this conversation about this deep brine well was really exciting. So that's kind of it. I'm going up to Maps on the Hill today. So our GIS team and our mappers and our bookstore always roll out a great display of maps. I haven't been up there in the past, so after our board meeting, I'm going to go check that out. Yeah, and so our presentation will really be focused on, kind of new science that we've done, and how we're supporting, our state and local governments, and the funding that we've gotten from the feds to again help understand our natural resources here. So a nice low-key year, which as a new director is kind of just where I want to be. We do have some intent language, which are changes to our UGS statutes. This is not something that we're putting through on our own. DNR has a big cleanup bill that has a bunch of intent language. So as we went through our statute and looked at what our statute says that we do, it was pretty obvious that there was a big piece missing. That is a huge part of what we do right now. There was virtually no mention of groundwater or wetlands anywhere in our statute. I think groundwater or water was mentioned once. And so we've added some language to our statute to add this as part of our, as part of our work that we do to support the state. So, our water budget studies that we do, resource planning, and then wetlands resources, evaluations, and coordination. We have the state wetlands coordinator in our office as well. This has become a really big piece of our work. If you look at our website, we've teed up some new wetlands apps as well to help people look at how we map and understand wetlands function and categories. So,
Do you get any pushback, or is this gonna be easy?
no, there was some collaboration with water rights and water resources to, because, managing water resources is the responsibility of DWRE. Managing water rights is the responsibility of DWRI, and they give us funding to help them do that, right? So we tweaked some of our language at their request.
Yeah, the pushback, you want to call it that we received is really the first 7 or so words of I, assist as requested by state and local agencies was their request.
They don't want you guys taking.
Exactly. They wanted a little bit more of a delineation of responsibility, which we're more than happy to have.
Yeah, we're in a supporting role. We don't make policy, so we don't regulate.
Nor do we want to.
Like it that
Yes,
way.
no, it's more fun.
That's why everyone loves us. We're never like the bad guys, right? And then the second is our board makeup, right? And we have 2 new board members that really help us diversify our board to better represent the work that we actually do. But we needed to formally change that in our statute because we put the cart before the horse a little bit as we had, 2 more senior board members retire out of our board and brought in our new board members. So we've changed the practice of civil engineering to engineering geology. That's Michael Hansen's role. The board makeup really had 5 mineral industry representatives between these 2. So 3 members that are in minerals and energy, and we added geothermal because, again, it's a very large part of what we do. So we still have our 3 board members that are representing the mineral industry, right? Ken and Riley and Richard. And then this is our general overall, I think this is Becky's slot. And then groundwater or water resources, Neil's slot as well. And then our public at large and interested in the goals of our survey is our board chair, Elissa. And then our ex officio, Sitla member, and thank you again for coming. I love having you here. Who also is quite knowledgeable about geology in and of himself. So yeah, so thank you. So this cleans up our language, brings us in line with, we want to make sure that our board makeup represents the work that we do, but also that our statute correctly addresses that. So a little bit of a change here. I don't expect any, we got some questions from the legislative analyst about this, fielded those. I don't expect any issues with that. And then I think this is my last slide before we can take a break, and then Ben will do our budget breakdown after this. But we really are turning our attention to kind of some newer types of external engagement. We're building a great relationship with some aides from Senator Curtis's office. They're actually coming Friday. We're going to the Natural History Museum with them. We've previously given them a tour of the Core Center and the Mega Block. I visited them when I have been in DC. There is another senior aide in Senator Mike Lee's office who was over the Natural Resources and Energy, Senate Energy Committee, who is actually moving to Interior. So he's leaving Senator Lee's office and going to a very high level position in the Associate Director's office in DC at USGS. So we're going to keep really close tabs on that person. Next week, the Earth MRI meetings that usually take place in December, I think, are next week. And at the same time, they have invited state geologists and participants to meet with the new U.S. Director, Dr. Ned Mamula. So this is a great opportunity to meet the new USGS Director and let them know how important the work that we collaborate with the USGS is through state surveys, and how we deploy that funding really supports, their goals, shared goals with the states, with the Trump administration. Because I have presentations to our legislature next week, I won't be at this meeting. Mike Vandenberg and Andrew Repke are going to the Earth MRI meetings, and they'll also help me with Dr. Mamula. I think I would like to go to Spring Liaison. So again, the American Association of State Geologists tees up legislative visits twice a year. This is when they, as state geologists, we go and meet with our legislative representatives in their offices across the U.S. Representation for senators and representatives. So this was really successful, and I think our visit last
was that in late September? I think it did really help move the needle on some of the things that we're doing, just letting them know how important, the core CM funding is and that kind of thing. State map, we had success stories about these, and we were still in some uncertainty with some of these, whether some of these projects would move through or not. And so being able to say like, yeah, watch out for, you'll see appropriations, right, for state map or for core CM or for Earth MRI. Keep an eye on those. So I think I'd like to go at the end of February back to DC and continue meeting with our representatives. And then the Intermountain West Coalition is something that was spawned out of the American Association of State Geologists. Also, Stefan really helped lead this off. They'll have their in-person meeting in April. This is working with all of our Intermountain states. Really great group of people with a lot of shared and common issues and approaches to what we're doing. You want to add anything about IMWC?
Yeah, so that's a coalition of the 8 Intermountain state surveys, basically. 8 or 9, I always forget the number. It's basically all the Western state surveys except the coastal states.
We've been having virtual meetings.
We've been having virtual meetings and then meetings in person. The USGS higher level folks attend those. And the ultimate goal here is to develop something that's kind of like, there's something called the Great Lakes Coalition. It's a coalition of Great Lakes adjacent state surveys. And they were able to get a line item for a variety of science funding. That's what we're seeking here. So we're building it first, and then hopefully we can find a way to fund it. At this stage, it's great for collaboration and figuring out what everybody's doing and basically learning all the different tricks of the trade.
Good technology transfer. Okay, I think I shot through our break like half an hour ago. So I think we can take a break and then we'll come back. And I did put a new agenda slide in here. When we come back, we will do a financial update with
Oh, Seth's in charge. Thanks, Seth. Okay, and let's turn it over to Ben for a financial update.
Alrighty, so I'm sure at some point in time you folks have discussed the UGS budget in depth, but I kind of wanted to break down a little bit about our process for budgeting and what this year's looked like. So the state fiscal year goes July 1 to June 30 every year. And somewhere in between, I'd say early August and early October, we try and do the budget for that fiscal year. So this year we finished our fiscal year 26 budget earlier than I think UGS ever has before, which was in early September. So you're already a couple of months into the fiscal year by the time you've determined your budget. I think
Which
a lot
is
of
terrifying if you're meeting.
a lot of UGS's history, I think we've been a little bit complacent with institutional knowledge. We've had incredible people that have set us up well, but we kind of driven in the past by looking the rearview mirror, and we've looked to do things a little bit differently going forward. Intentionality has really been a theme for us this past year, just with strategic planning and trying to understand what are our budget challenges going to be not only this year, but in the future. So we finished the budget a little bit earlier this year, and this is what we came out with. So to break this down, this bottom third is outside revenue. We have federal funding at 2.4 million, state funding from other agencies at 2.5. We have this small orange sliver that has the bookstore at about $200,000. And then we have expendable receipts and services where people more or less just hire us for work. This $6 million figure is the amount of general funds we receive yearly from the state. So that is fixed. We get that year in, year out, with no change. This $3.2 million figure is our mineral lease. That's variable. That's what we're appropriated. Our actual collection may come in lower. The top two in gray and red are earmarked general funds. That $1.75 million amount was our geothermal building block we received in last year's legislative session. The 1.2 is our carryover from last year. That's our savings that we can roll over year to year. So we maxed out our authority there. We carried over everything we could into fiscal year 26. So looking at this, about 55% of our budget is variable year to year. Yes.
What's the total dollar value?
Yeah, total value is just over 16 million, I'd like to say. Yeah, 16.4, 16.5, just about. 55% of that is variable. We don't really know what it's going to be year to year. Midway through the year, we're not sure what it's going to be. Historically, part of our challenge with UGS and budgeting is that our revenue budget would come in about 15% short at the end of the year. We were not getting all of that grant funded revenue we expected to. So when we make a budget in October, and then at the end of June, we're like, oh shoot, we're 15% short. It led to that kind of difficult budget situation that we talked about earlier today. So intentionality. This year, we sat down, we got the budget done a little bit earlier, but before Russ left, what we also tried to do was something I don't think UGS has ever done before. We looked to fiscal year 27 and tried to forecast where we would be at the end of next year. So I apologize for this. It's a little bit blurry, but this is our look at where we think we will end fiscal year 27. So at the top, we have our general fund amount. So it's going to be a little bit higher than this past year. We have our appropriation of $3.2 million for mineral lease. We have some restricted funds also coming from the state. And then this fourth or fifth line down, it's going to be hard to see. Use the mouse if I may.
Yeah. Here, let me sit down and dry.
No, all right here. So
I
this,
can do that.
yeah,
So you tell me where you're going.
this line right here is our outside funding, which comes from
What, the
grants.
cursor doesn't show.
Oh, it does not show. Oh,
Unfortunately.
then I'll just
So you
use my
have to
hand.
point. And then I'll talk
Does
about
this
the
extend?
scenarios.
That'd be great. So these three numbers here, 3.6, 3.8, and 4.1 are our revenue scenarios for next year. We know more or less what grants we have in hand, the amount of money we'll have available to spend on those. We know more or less what proposals are pending and likely to be awarded. So we can say, all right, with some certainty, we'll receive somewhere between 3.6 and $4.1 million in outside revenue for next year. That allows us to then figure out the rest of the budget. With that, we know we have some earmarked general funds for projects from the legislature. They gave us $400,000 2 years ago for a critical mineral study. We have to carry about 150 of that to next year. We anticipate spending about $750,000 on geothermal this year, meaning that we'll carry about $1 million of additional geothermal funding to next year. We have similar amounts for our Bonneville salt flats, and it's kind of carried over year to year. Our personnel costs stay at about 85% of our total budget. Next year, it would be somewhere around 11.6 million. Even with the vacancies and a couple of new hires, we don't really expect that to change too much. And then to perform our grant work, we have travel in and out of the state. We have to buy new equipment and supplies. That in and of itself makes up another about $1.8 million. So our total amount of expense for next year, we're anticipating to be about 13.6 million. And our revenue across all state amounts, our agency to agency transfers, our general funds, and our outside grant funding we have at 14.7. So we're anticipating a carryover around our authority. For pretty much every single revenue scenario, our low of 3.6 to our high of 4.1, we're carrying over $1 million into next year. We don't know quite where it'll fall, but we know with some certainty we have some semblance of financial stability. This is something we haven't done before. We're January 21st, we're a little more than 6 months out from the start of next fiscal year. So this is forward looking by about 18 months. I don't think UGS is ever driven by looking forwards. It's always been kind of looking in the rear view saying, how'd things go last year? Where do we think this year will end up? So this is really exciting for us to be able to say with pretty strong certainty, we know we'll be okay next year. Fiscal year 28 is a little bit harder to forecast. We don't know quite what grants we have. Excuse me, quite what grants we have. We don't quite know what revenues will be, but we know we have a relatively similar amount of available funding. We think we'll probably have another $1 million carry forward after that year. It's a complicated budget with 55% being variable. Each year is a little bit different. UGS has gotten particularly good, I think, at weathering storms and downturns. We've gotten pretty creative with our solutions for that. But now I think we have a team in place and a new structure of discipline and intent where we can say, more certainty, we will be okay next year, not because we're good at weathering the storm, but because we know what our financial forecast is, which is exciting. Any questions? I ran through that kind of quickly. A lot of moving pieces, a lot of different numbers.
This was sent out in your packet if you want to take a little bit of a closer look. There's a couple versions, Ben. I realize that this doesn't have our general fund potential 5% cut
Yes.
on this second line. So you can just kind of mentally subtract about $320,000 from these bottom lines. If that cut goes through, we're not sure it will. That's really the legislature's call about that. But we still have plenty of room here. What we also don't want to do is lapse funds. So we're going to build a project list of, quick action equipment we might want to buy, or I think, filling these vacancies will help. But as we get usually within 3 months and 2 months and then 1 month before our fiscal year closes out, we'll look at where we are and spend some money on something so we don't lapse those funds.
Part of UGS's ability to weather the storm has been weathering the extra good years as well. A few years ago, mineral lease came in, I think, about $1 million higher than we anticipated. So in order to avoid lapsing funds, our program managers got a bit of a shopping spree in the last quarter of the year. And I think having this kind of set list of, hey, if we have extra funds, here's how we can avoid lapsing money would be incredibly helpful. So I think building in that level of detail.
Well, and we also have our restricted account, which is another savings account, if you will. So if we have big mineral lease, big severance, it can stay in there above our appropriation. And then when we lapse money, if we do lapse, a component of that lapse goes back to our restricted account. Okay, so we don't lapse everything. We lose a prorated percentage relative to the restricted account versus the rest of our funding.
I think we lose about 65% of anything that we lapse, and the other 35% is returned to us in our restricted account.
So having our lapsing ceiling bumped up to 1.5 should cover us, I think.
It definitely will.
Not, I'll hire 2 more people really quick.
Are there any big ticket equipment or infrastructure items on
Like a
the wish
$50,000
list?
LiDAR drone gadget, yeah, there's one. So that's actually accounted for in the building block grant, so, which is sort of segregated from this estimate and these revenue adjustments. So there, again, this kind of goes back to space planning too, right? If we need to buy some cubicle modules or do something to kind of help configure our space, our break room is really trashy looking, and I've asked for an estimate of DSCM to replace the countertop and floors and paint in there. So we'll look and see where the budget comes in for that. It shouldn't be like a huge number, right? So, and I don't like making my lunch on that countertop.
Well,
I
I think that idea about having an intentional list of things that benefit our mission that we have sitting there that we can act on relatively quickly because of our variability here. If we're in a situation where we can lapse, if we have that list, we can move on things and get stuff in the door, software or, geophysical gadgets, data sets, whatever the case may be.
I don't think it's hard for scientists to buy new fun toys.
And you said the important words, benefit your mission.
Yeah, that's the key thing. That's what we really
Yes.
want that list to represent. Because there are pieces, if we bought a given piece of software per se, it could really change our game in terms of some of the products we put out.
Yeah, so I think if we put it out there to our staff of like, what's your wish list? I think we could probably accommodate quite a bit in our budget if we need to, right? Again, I'm gonna wait for a little more, right? And I just want to say thank you to Ben. I've relied really heavily on his analysis and expertise, as well as Russ Fillmore, who, kind of came in 2 years ago about a brand new budget. And he came from the division of emergency management, where they have a much more stable budget, and ours is not that. So it was a big lift for Russ. And if you know Russ and his personality, uncertainty is not where he likes to be. So we really challenged him a lot, bringing Crystal on, who is super confident. So we rely a lot on the financial insights and advice from our finance team. So I'm excited about bringing on a new finance manager. We really want to find somebody who's the best fit for UGS, not only in terms of their skill set, but their culture also, and can really help us. And then also Stefan, he was a key part of helping understand some of the survey's issues and when and where it was appropriate to move forward with some of these strategic changes. So I have a great team that I get to rely on, and I'm really grateful for that. So thanks, you guys. It was quite the ride the last time, but we did it. Okay. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions about the budget, or if you have any additional insights for us. This is where you all as a board, as people in industry who use and see our data and how we push it out to the public, if you have ideas for our strategic direction or more that we can do to help support your industry, I know I'm all ears for that. So I'm excited about our board makeup, and thanks to you guys also for, your patience as we sort of worked through all this. It was a lot for UGS, but we're there. We'll move on to some discussion items. We just have a few things to think about. The first is a license.
So
Isn't that fun?
Nice.
I want that.
we are very excited about this. I'm not sure how many of you followed last year's legislative session. There was a bill introduced that capped the amount of revenue a state agency could get from license plate sales. The State Historic Preservation Office, with their black and white plate that you see all over town, made, I think, 1.4 million, and that was way more than the legislature necessarily wanted. So they've made a cap now for $300,000 in revenue per state agency for license plate sales. 300,000 may not be a lot to other agencies, it's a lot to us. So we're interested in getting a couple of license plates out into the world. Paleontology is a great kind of pop cultural way for us to communicate. Allosaurus, the state fossil, would be excellent to have on a license plate. We currently have a collaboration with the Natural History Museum, where we're going to put out a suite of license plates in collaboration. Both organizations will do a couple of plates. We'll split the revenue 50-50 with the hopes that rising tides will bring all ships up. And this is our first plate. So Dino Fest is going to be an event at the Natural History Museum later this month. I think it's January 30th and 31st. We're going to let the public vote. We're meeting with the Natural History Museum team tomorrow. They'll put a couple of plates out. We'll put a couple of plates out. And this will be our first plate. We're hoping it's one of ours. There's some kind of intricacy with the design guidelines. We have to have only one organization's name. We have to have a restricted account set up to receive the revenue, but we would really like to get one of these plates out into the world. I think they're pretty darn cool. I think every 6-year-old in the state is going to want their parents to get a dinosaur license plate. I think
60-year-old.
Yeah. Most of my staff will probably change their plate too. So there's a little bit of details to work out, but we're very excited about the collaboration with the Natural History Museum, and we'll hopefully have a couple of other plates coming out in the next year or so. But this is our first effort, and I think it looks pretty darn good.
Will you let us know when they're available?
Absolutely. Yeah, we will be doing a good bit of press around that.
So I think they need a certain number of plates to pre-order to move forward with it.
They don't.
They don't?
Yeah, as a state agency, we can just give them a check and say,
Oh,
we'll be set.
okay.
We have all the paperwork filled out. We're ready to go with whatever the public is most interested in after Dino Fest and the penny vote or whatever we do to decide which plate goes forward. But we'll do a good bit of PR around this to get this out to the world. I know I want one, so.
So there'll be like a voting then on which plate?
This-
We could do like a voting on which plate we would.
I think that's the goal for Dino Fest, is that they'll have a couple of buckets and they'll have a jar of pennies, and you put a penny in whatever bucket of plate you like the most.
Can
So-
you vote electronically or something?
We'll see. We need to decide or
Yeah.
discuss with the Natural History Museum and coordinate a little bit.
Okay.
But we're very excited about it. There's great dinosaurs here. The museum wants to do kind of more fleshed out paleo renderings. We prefer the fossil version. I think ours look a lot
I
better,
think
but
they're super striking. Yeah.
it's
yeah.
exciting prospect for UGS to have a more consistent source of revenue.
Are they just gonna do one, or will they do kind of more, if they're successful, will they do different ones going forward?
Yeah, well, I think the goal is to have 4 total license plates between the
Do
organizations.
you have the other designs?
Haven't determined them yet. I think
Okay.
a mammoth would be really cool, given
Oh,
the
I want a mammoth.
Given the-
You definitely need to go to Dino Fest and
Yeah.
vote then, Becky. I like a whole bunch of pennies. I don't think they're keeping track.
But
So will you send us that information on Dino Fest? Will you send us the information on the 30th
yes,
session?
absolutely.
Okay.
If you have suggestions of other dinosaurs, megafauna, geologic wonders, sites that you think would be cool on a license plate, we'd love to hear. The design guidelines are a little bit strict. We're limited to this kind of 3-inch by 3-inch square on the left side of what we can do. Gosh, they look pretty good. So any ideas we're open to. The museum has a graphic design team we're working with. We have our own graphic designers. So we're hoping to get out some really cool plates.
Not only do we have our own graphic designers, we have our paleontologists to contend with, and they have thoughts about it.
Well, and they've been very helpful getting us in this direction, right? Because they're very interested in these things being accurate, right, and factual. And I think honestly, what we've done here is a great look. I think it's going to connect. There are 2 other states, at least, that have dino themed license plates. There's one in Colorado, which is kind of cartoonish. And then there's one in North Carolina. That's actually a pretty cool plate.
Yeah, the North Carolina one, things are shifted over a little bit more to the right, and they actually have the vertebrae of the dinosaur coming down the left side, which looks very cool. But unfortunately, with our state guidelines, we can't quite do that. But this looks pretty
It
good.
looks really good, and kudos to Ben for getting this to the finish line. I think this is something we started talking about over
Year
a
ago,
year ago.
At least, yeah.
And Ben has gotten it to the finish line. The collaboration with the Natural History Museum was kind of a last minute comment out the door as Stefan and I were leaving a meeting. That they were thinking about doing a dino themed license plate. We were like, uh-oh. So Ben got to work and there was some negotiation. I feel like we came into a really good spot where we just go in house with them. So, and we have a great working relationship with the Natural History Museum. So super excited about this.
Same here.
How about a trilobite?
Yeah.
Trilobite is a great idea and something that would also look really good and fit into the dimensions of it.
I talked to Jackie about that. Thank you.
Yeah, great idea.
We'll get some information out to you folks about Dino Fest once we determine the course of things at the museum. Talking about that later today.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. I think that's all I'm
Awesome.
due for here.
Okay, next up, Stefan's been cooking up some ideas about university fellowships with our budget, now that we have a little room.
Yeah, so one of our mission elements really is to reach out to various educational entities, higher ed. That's something we have done, we do periodically, but we by and large do it on an ad hoc basis or as needed, or if we have a given grant or something like that. That's one thing we're trying to do with this. The other thing is that when we post jobs, very high level jobs here that are very attractive to the geoscience community, we don't get a whole lot of qualified Utah applicants. So the Utah schools are not really training folks, at least for the work that we do per se, as much as they have in the past. That's another goal of setting up something a little more regularized, if you will, in terms of a fellowship where we
consultant dietary.
Yeah.
Yes, right?
Training, people to help locally.
Yeah, and we're aware of that, and we see that for a relatively small investment, we could fund a master's student or part of a PhD. It would have to be focused on applied geology in Utah, so it would benefit Utah, serve our mission, and also train the next generation of geoscientists. The actual input, the annual cost could be something between like 20 or 40K, which if we're careful about our budget and we build it in, we can do something like that. The next step is really kind of building out an agreement with one or more universities about what this would look like. And we've started on that. We have a draft MOU. We've talked to some people up at the U. We would probably use the U as sort of a test case and then expand it to like BYU or maybe Utah State, maybe UVU, we'll have to see. And I guess beyond letting you guys know where we're headed here, I would love some input about it, and particularly with respect to how we might govern this, because I recognize this will be popular if we can set it up, so we're gonna have to pick and choose, and we'll need some sort of group that can help us pick project ideas, where we wanna go, and then what student might get it. I guess I'm interested in input from the board about that. It could potentially be a board task. I don't want to give the board more tasks, but it's something that we could engage in this kind of setting on an annual basis and say, we have this list of ideas relative to whatever resources in Utah. Here's a list of students that could work on this stuff.
Are there specific skill sets that you notice are hard to fill with people from this region?
A lot of them with me, I'm kind of the field geology person. Field geology is a big one. They're not, the local schools really have moved away from doing field geology. And that's the basic input for everything we do and a lot of the applied geosciences. And so I think that would be a focal point. There's water stuff though too. There's various minerals, energy and minerals issues that could be relevant.
Penn State used to come and visit Bingham, and I would give them tours, and I'd have people raise their hands. What do you guys want to go into? How many environmental geologists? And literally everybody would raise their hands. Nobody would be doing
Hard rock.
Mineral
Mineral deposit
exploration,
right.
field mapping. A lot of schools are
Water
moving away from field
resources.
mapping.
Neil mentioned water resources. You take a basic hydrogeology class and that doesn't really prepare you to do the type of work that you do.
Yeah, there's like no applied hydrogeologists out there. It seems like it's kind of scary.
Just really scary if you need additional people, right? That means you have to take the time to train them in-house. This is something that, we may pilot this with the U. We've already kind of opened the door to talk about this. We might pilot this for maybe a 2-year project. Just kind of reserve that potentially $40,000 a year. And then if it looks like this is feasible and we kind of develop the format for how to select projects and students, we would just commit that money into our budget and expand it to, we have a lot of people from BYU here sitting on our board. So this is where you could maybe help us also.
is look at connecting with BYU about fellowships like that. So maybe if we had a couple fellowships a year and they're just sustained funded, right? So students know when they're, you know, matriculating at their university to do a master's or a PhD, that there's this competitive fellowship that they can sign up with.
I like the idea of it being focused on field skills, which seem to be dropping off of the radar for a lot of schools.
That would cover the minerals exploration side, the field mapping side.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm interested in mapping. And went to BYU, and I just don't understand how they're not focused on mapping anymore. But I'm not really involved with the faculty at BYU anymore, but I know that Riley is.
Yeah, I mean, this is a systemic shift that's happened in academia away from field science, right, with respect to geology. And I think the reasoning for them really is grant money and then publishing high-level research, right? And not that you can't do that with field geology, but maybe it's easier to do that in little lab science things. I think that's what spurred it. But the reality is it's set our industry up for some problems going forward because we're not training the next generation of these people, at least in Utah. And I think this is beyond Utah. And so with a fellowship like this, what we'd be hoping to do is kind of drive at least a slot or two of applied geology training. You know, and we can not only train the students, but we can also go look at specific resource issues too. If there's something out there that's worth a master's, it moves the bar on it. This would be a way to do it.
Universities are also really crushed right now with the pullback in NSF funding and other funding. And they are digging deep for alternative ways to support their work and their students' work. And so this is a little bit of a lifeline that we can throw out. With the U, we talked about a 50-50 split to help fund a student. I think that's where that $20,000 to $40,000 a year, depending on, you know, what level student we're helping with, can really help them. And, you know, we can either look for someone to help complete a specific project for us, or we can look at what those researchers and their students might want to, you know, work on and vet those as well. So lots of details to be sorted out still, but this is something that it's in our statute, right? Our geologic information and outreach team has been really focused on K through 12 education, which is actually not called out in our statute. What's called out in our statute is our interaction with state and local universities, right? And so let's turn our attention back to that and see where we can do something that is mutually beneficial for students and universities and the survey and the public that we serve also.
I've also heard that the universities, the field camps, they cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
They have a lot of liability associated with them, and they get a lot of pushback on inclusivity issues now.
Right.
And those three also are causing part of the pullback.
Yeah, I'm tied to Idaho State's field station, the Lost River Field Station. I did my graduate work at Idaho State, and after I left, they built the Lost River Field Station, which is a big field camp facility outside Mackay, Idaho, just north of Mackay. And yeah, it takes a bit of funding to run that, and they can't collect all of that from students. So there's a bunch of alumni that like write checks every couple years to do stuff for it. But I know that field camp honed a lot of my skills as a geologist. My master's degree that was really field-based really is where I dialed that in. So again, welcome suggestions for ideas about how to format this. And then, yeah, with the connections to BYU that we have on our board, I think that's the next door to open up after maybe we get a little pilot project down the road with the U. So we'll try to stand this up maybe by next semester. We might have to wait a year, not quite sure. It might be a little late to be talking about this for students that are starting in the fall.
Yeah, we'll see when. It's not if, it's when. We will. I think this is good idea. It's worth pursuing. And I think that the return on 20,000 or 40,000 we could put into a student is significant, right? But there's some stuff to line out. And I think particularly how we choose projects, basically choose projects and students. That's the one where I think, maybe this board is a venue for that. I don't know, but it is an option that exists. And maybe we could add some additional university folks too, to some sort of meeting to pick things.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Me too.
And I would like to get UIU involved. I just wish I was, I just wish I knew the faculty better.
Well, maybe this is a chance for us all to do that, Becky.
Yeah.
So I hear you. I'm not a BYU student. I'm not even a U of U student. So same. So again, that idea of external engagement, right? Let's turn our attention to what our statute directs us to do and go make those connections, right? And build those relationships. And all of us can do that together. So, thank you. We'll hear more about this as we move forward on it. Upcoming announcements, I'm purposely being a little not super transparent about what these are. But there are 3 external awards or collaborations that are about to be announced. One of them was a international travel and proposal that you guys all approved. That announcement will come within the next week, if not sooner.
The 27th.
The 27th. Yeah, so early next week. And then we will follow up with an announcement right after that is going through that company for their approval right now. And then there's some travel immediately. Actually, I think they fly out Monday. So super excited about that opportunity. The geology is really interesting for this project. Significant award. And I'm really proud of our team that pursued this. So also is making those 2 people very, very busy, and we're gonna need to get them suitable. So, so that's one of them. The other 2 are deep well drilling projects that I think I can present next week in our legislative presentation. So we have 2. One is a international company, and the other is a local company that's going to help us collaborate on some deep drilling. Those are coming up.
For these geothermal eyes.
One is.
We can leave it there for now.
Yeah, I don't want to.
I mean, the broad brush is that these are large scale partnerships with industry to go answer fundamental resource and geoscience questions.
And both of those projects were brought in by our team, who have great external relationships. Those were, their personal contacts through the years and through their industry expertise that came in to meet with them and offer these opportunities to collaborate. So again, those more senior people on our team are bringing in these opportunities. That's really exciting. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But I'll be able to announce a little bit more by the time we do our presentation to the legislature, and there will be a press release on that of them. Lastly, so our last discussion item is our board field trip. We're looking ahead for your board field trip later this year. And Stefan has a great idea for a field trip through Southeast Utah. If we can set up the dates right, we would probably, I'm trying to get the state plane to fly you guys down because it's a long ways to drive. And so the state plane can get you guys down there really quickly, and then we would field trip our way back. And I think we had initially set some dates for September 17th or 18th. That might be a little bit better to push this into October, but I wasn't sure what your obligations are. So let's Stefan maybe walk you through the itinerary, and then we can talk about dates. I see Becky already has her calendar out.
I do.
Yeah, I'm opening mine up too. So what we would do here is we have some ongoing mapping on the Navajo Nation down south in Monument Valley. There's actually an airstrip right there in Gould.
One question, what kind of a plane is this?
It's the larger one is a Beechcraft or Cessna, I think, single engine. I've been in it. If you're not a fan of planes, you can ride down. So our field team would go down and meet us down there.
Yeah, we would drive at least
The
whatever
vehicles,
vehicles.
we need vehicles
down.
for you guys.
So we
I'm
would-
flying around the whole time.
It basically
So-
takes 7 hours to drive there from here.
Yeah.
Any way you look at it.
You're
So it's a
welcome
long
to
ways
drive.
from here.
Okay,
We would,
I like planes, just not small planes.
Peggy, I don't really like small planes either. That's
I love
kind of
small
what I would
planes.
be driving, but.
I even love helicopters more.
Which month has more turbulence?
Yeah.
I have no idea. So we would.
love this idea. You can drive. No one is gonna make you get it.
I like the idea.
So basically, we would fly down there to Monument Valley, and we'd get a tour of the new geologic mapping with Matthew Morris. We would likely have some folks from the Navajo Nation join us too. Some of their water resource people and maybe some of their folks a little higher up. We would go around and look at that geology, which is fascinating. And then that would be our first day. And then we'd drive up and we would likely stay in Mexican Hat or Bluff. There's a great San Juan Inn right along the San Juan River would be a good stop for the evening. The second day, now this is a long field trip too. That's the other thing. This would be it's just so far to get down there. It'd be a 2-night field trip, 3 days. So the second day we would drive north from Mexican Hat and look at some stratigraphy and then more new mapping near Blanding. And then we'd finish that with a cruise through the Bajo Mountains, where that's one of our areas. We're cooking up different schemes to move the bar on the mapping there. It's got some really interesting geology. It's a beautiful drive. And then we'd spend that second night in Monticello at the Blue Atomic Inn, which is this cool old 50s kind of. It's actually a nice place. It's a nice place, and both these places have good food options. That's kind of the key. Blanding has a good hotel, but not really good options for food. So it kind of would move between. That would be the second day, and then the final day, we would basically work our way back up to Salt Lake here, but we'd have Lauren Reher, one of our other mappers, and she's a Colorado Plateau structure expert and salt tectonic structure expert, give us some tour stops in the Paradox Basin around Arches, probably.
Cool. That sounds great.
Those who are at the board meeting are also invited, right?
No.
Yes, we can figure out the logistics of how, the actual group and scale. It's really about whether this one sounds interesting to the board members and others at this stage.
Oh, yes, it does.
Okay.
At least this board member.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it sounds great.
And then I think it's dates, trying to figure out dates. And again, we'd want Matthew Morris, one of the mappers. He would run kind of the first 2 days, and then we'd need Lauren Reher, one of the other mappers, to kind of help out with that third day. And we were thinking maybe the very end of September or earliest October might be best at this stage.
Also have to make sure the plane is available.
Yeah, that's
Make sure
it.
the
So there's a
plane is
bunch of
available.
logistical things that we'd have to work out.
But also you guys have your own obligations, so are there any dates that don't work for you guys right now? Does anybody have a vacation or other professional obligations on your calendar right now for late September, early October?
No, I don't have any scuba diving trips.
I do not have any scuba diving this year. I'm going down the Grand Canyon the first week in August with Adam Hiscock, one of our employees, and his dad and a bunch of people. So, and then after that, my calendar's wide open for you guys.
Were you still thinking about the White Mesa Mill?
So that's a possibility. That's certainly a possibility. We might be able to tour it. We could also, we can talk about groundwater stuff around, around Blanding too. We can talk about uranium stuff too. There's some uranium mines that aren't too far away. We need to put the trip itinerary together, but broadly it would be looking at stuff down near Monument Valley the first day. The second day, we'd look at stuff around Greater Blanding, moving over to Monticello, and then the third and final day, we'd look at stuff probably near Moab, Paradox Basin stuff, and we could have energy and minerals folks join us for some of the Paradox. We could have a stop in the big flat field, which is, I mean, that has some massively productive oil wells in it. It's just north of Canyonlands. So the stops would kind of be TBD, if you will. It's really about your guys' interest and then potential availability over a time frame here.
So you're really talking about the last week of September or first couple weeks of October, just keep
I
them
think
open?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
You'll find
weather's
out some
probably
changes.
optimum, then we don't wanna go much earlier than that, it's just really hot down there. So even early October might still be warm, or it could snow, who knows?
I mean,
So-
and then I guess the other thing is like the time of the week. We could do this as a Wednesday through Friday kind of thing. Like leave on Wednesday, return on Friday. If we did that, maybe the earliest we could do it might be the 23rd of September. And then we could also potentially do it that next week, which would be the 30th of September.
I think the later.
Starting
we should do
dates.
September, the better. So, or even into early October. So Cheryl, you don't have the plane availability, do you?
No, but I
Okay.
will figure out how to.
Okay, just wondering if there were any dates we had to.
Once
set
you
up.
have that, would you send us a survey to see,
Oh,
give us
yeah,
a
we
couple
can
of
do
weeks or
that.
something?
Sure.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Availability for it.
We can send out like a doodle poll or
Yeah.
something about your availability. In general, is starting on a Wednesday morning and coming back Friday night workable for you guys? We don't go into your weekend. I know we go into your Friday. But if that's workable for you guys, we'll just give you opportunities, you know, and then we'll check the plane schedule. If you are gonna drive down, our team would need to, drive down with you early.
Yeah, I mean, for those of us driving, we would need to leave on Tuesday.
Maybe the night before.
So, I mean, if you don't want to fly, I'm not a small plane person either, so I'm not really. I'll skip that part. But.
If you could think of something, some economic geology thing like uranium roll front deposits or the mill or one of the lithium brine plays or potash,
Okay.
that'd be interesting
Well,
too.
let's build that
Thank
in. Let's
you.
make sure and build that
Yeah,
in.
great suggestion.
So that's something I know we can do in the Paradox, and we can also do around Blanding in some form or another. And the area that we've just mapped on the Navajo Nation has a bunch of legacy uranium mines too.
That would be interesting.
Yeah,
We can talk about those, and then also that they've done a bunch of remediation there to clean that stuff up recently.
And with the potential expansion of White Mesa, I think there's a big conversation to be had there, also around some of the environmental issues. And as well, we may be doing some work on the Burrow Canyon aquifer in the next little while. We'll kind of see where that comes through, so we can certainly talk about that. And then again, I just wanna, make sure you guys are aware, the UGS has a fund for our board. We will take care of all of the expenses for this. So you're our guests on this trip. We don't have any cool places to stay like the field house at Fish Springs.
San Juan Inn is pretty cool.
San Juan is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I hope you like Navajo tacos, because that's what I remember they served.
Yeah, they have decent food. I mean, they have some options at the restaurant there. And then Monticello has two different good restaurants that would be good for a group.
Yeah, we stayed at the Recapture Inn the last time we went down there. It was a pretty nice little place too.
Okay, yeah, we can look at housing. Okay, well, we'll follow up with a poll then for you guys. And with that is all that I have to meet with you guys about. So, thank you. Our next board meeting, I'm sorry, I didn't put our dates here. April
16th, April 15th, it's the 15th.
April 15th, 16th.
15th, it's Wednesday, April 15th. Yeah, April 15th.
So that's the
Tax
week.
day.
Tax day.
Yeah.
Looks good to me. It's tax day. 16th, okay. Thursday, right?
It's the 15th. I think we have it on those the 15th. It is Wednesday the 15th.
Yeah, that's what I bet too.
Wednesday the 15th?
Yep.
Okay, that's great. Everybody okay with that date? Then with that, Madam Chair.
Great, well, thank you for the great report and kudos to righting the ship. It is now 10:59 and
We're out of time.
and this meeting is adjourned. So thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Thank you so much for your time.